There's a new president in the White House and he is wasting no time in getting to work. On day one of taking office, U.S. President Joe Biden signed 15 executive orders and 2 presidential memos. Listen in.
Get to work immediately. As we've indicated earlier, we're going to be signing a number of executive orders over the next several days to week. And I'm going to start today. The compounding crisis of COVID-19, along with the economic crisis following that, and climate crisis, and racial equity issues, and some of the executive actions I'm going to be signing today are going to help change the course of the COVID crisis, and we're going to combat climate change in a way that we haven't done so far, and advance racial equity and support other underserved communities. We're going to rebuild our economy as well, and these are just all starting points, we're going to, in the process of rebuilding the economy, do what I said throughout the campaign and while running rebuild the backbone of the country, the middle class. And so there's going to be a lot of focus on that.
In a bid to jumpstart the U.S. government's response to the coronavirus crisis, Biden signed a string of executive orders intended to lead the country out of the worst health crisis that it's ever seen in more than a century. His first action included a compulsory mandate on wearing face masks on federal property for federal employees. He also established a COVID-19 coordinator to oversee the White House's efforts to distribute vaccines against the infection and halting the process of withdrawing from the World Health Organization. This as the U.S. marked a total of 400,000 deaths related to COVID-19 since the pandemic began. On the subject of immigration, President Biden bolstered the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program that protects immigrants who arrived in the U.S. as children from being deported. He also revoked the Trump government's plans to exclude non-citizens from census count and overturned another order that pushed to find and deport unauthorized immigrants. He also ended the so-called Muslim ban, which blocked travel to the United States from several predominantly Muslim and African countries, and halted the construction of Trump's border wall with Mexico as well. Coming to the controversial topic of climate change, President Biden began the process to re-enter the U.S. in the climate accords, that is the Paris Climate Accords, and the U.S. will now rejoin the same 30 days from now. A slew of Trump administration's environmental policies, including revoking the permit for the Keystone Pipeline and reversing rollbacks to vehicle emission standards. He also took a series of steps to promote racial equality. He revoked Trump's executive order as well, which limits the ability of federal agencies to hold diversity and inclusion training. He ordered all agencies to review and report on equity in their ranks within 200 days. The order moves to ensure that Americans of all backgrounds have equal access to federal government resources, benefits and services. Another executive order requires that the federal government does not discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. Now, for more about President Biden's new executive orders, we are being joined by our correspondent Jagriti Dave from Washington, D.C. Jagriti, welcome. Now, it's a big day for the United States. Joe Biden is the 46th president of the country after a very controversial and unprecedented election. Tell us about his first day in office and all the executive orders now making global headlines.
Yes, well, the first day in office, he's really not wasted any time. Only a few hours after being inaugurated as president, after making that walk to the White House, after laying the wreath with former presidents at the tomb of the unknown soldier at Arlington Cemetery, Joe Biden went into the Oval Office and he signed a slew of executive orders, many of them reversing key Trump-era policies. You mentioned the rejoining of the Climate Accord, which White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said would be come into effect in 30 days' time. They have written to the UN announcing their intention to return. In fact, the resumption of press briefings is another return to the pre-Trump era. Daily press briefings are set to resume Monday to Friday as of tomorrow. Right. This resetting of the tone of the conversation between the White House and the press is also another change in direction and tone from this administration to the previous one. Other executive orders, of course, include the reversal of the so-called Muslim ban, the mask mandate on federal property, the extension of student federal loan pause, and a federal eviction moratorium. Some of those related to the COVID-19 pandemic, which is going to form front and centre of many of the measures that we're going to hear coming from this administration in the next few days.
Right, Jagati, since you mentioned a mask mandate, now this has been one of the key promises and Biden has delivered, but the question is, will Americans and officials follow this, given that the wearing of masks has been such a subject of political debate in the US?
Well, Joe Biden had initially talked about a nationwide mask mandate, but of course there were possibilities that that is not constitutionally viable. So requesting having a mask mandate on federal property seems to be something that Joe Biden says is within his authority.
Right.
So that is something that he has asked for, which, you know, I think considering the state of the pandemic, I think that is something that officials will probably be quite keen to enact. And I think a lot of people are, you know, realising the extent of the pandemic.
Right. Coming to two more controversial topics. Tell us about Biden's stance on immigration and climate change. It is, of course, in stark contrast to Donald Trump's stance.
Yes, indeed. You know, Joe Biden has talked about, you know, making changes to the border wall policy. He's halted the establishment, the continuation of funds directed to the border wall. He's also giving a pathway to citizenship to many Americans, young Americans who arrived here as children, who are undocumented. This is an approach that's very different to Donald Trump. He has, however, said that many of the border policies are unlikely to change immediately. They will take time. It's not going to be an overnight change. So if there is this sort of feeling that there is going to be a sudden rush of people coming into the United States, that is something that, you know, isn't going to change overnight. And of course, I think Joe Biden has also said that he wants to have a responsible immigration policy. But again, what that looks like, I think we'll have to hear, and there'll be more questions asked about that. That might be a point of contention between the Biden administration and the supporters of the previous president's administration, his more restrictive immigration policies.
Right, Jagriti, my final question. The vaccine rollout plans of the Biden administration, will we see him meet the ambitious goal that he has set in the first 100 days?
Well, the administration has said that it will be challenging. Things will take time. The extent of the pandemic is so great. We have more than 400,000 Americans who have lost their lives to the pandemic. So this is something that is front and centre of this administration's minds. They are intending to get millions of shots into American arms, but the extent of the challenge is great. They are resuming the briefings on COVID-19. We're going to hear more from health experts in the days to come, and we're going to hear more information about the more national plan, a national strategy. That is one of the announcements that Joe Biden has made, a more centralised plan to tackle the coronavirus pandemic.
Right, Jagriti, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast. WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.